Hi everybody, thanks for checking out my new video. If you're interested, you could like, comment, or subscribe for more content. If you want to support my channel, you could check out the link where you could donate to my Patreon account in the description. So today I wanted to talk about the Kali Yuga, which in Hinduism, Hindu mythology, the Kali Yuga is the yuga that we're living in right now. So there's 4 different yugas, which are periods of time in which basically the virtue or decaying of the universe the virtue goes down, decay increases until the Kali Yuga, which is the worst one that we're in, and then it starts over again with the Sat Yuga, which is the most pure yuga, and the cycles go on like that for the whole creation of this universe until it's dissolved back into God, back into Brahman. So before I start talking about this myself, I wanted to read something out of Swami Prabhupada's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. So it's a verse in the Gita and then a little bit of his commentary on it. And he's talking about the different yugas in here. So before I start talking, I'm going to read this because it'll kind of give you an idea of where we're going with this and just a little of background knowledge on the subject. So the Bhagavad Gita says, by human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day. Brahma is the creator of the universe. And also such is the duration of his night. Now we're going to read what the Swami wrote as commentary. He says, the duration of the material universe is limited. It is manifested in cycles of kalpas. A kalpa is a day of Brahma, and one day of Brahmas consists of 1,000 cycles of 4 yugas or ages. So that's a massive amount of time. If you hear what he's saying, you can play it back if you didn't. The ages are Satya, Tretya, Dvapara, and Kali Yugas. The cycle of Satya is characterized by virtue, wisdom, and religion, there being practically no ignorance and vice. The Yuga lasts 1,728,000 years. In the Treta Yuga, vice is introduced. In this Yuga lasts 1,296,000 years. In the Dvapara Yuga, there is an even greater decline in virtue and religion, vice increasing. In this Yuga lasts 864,000 years. And finally, in Kali Yuga, the Yuga we've now been experiencing over the past 5,000 years, there is an abundance of strife, ignorance, irreligion, and vice. True virtue being practically non-existent, this Yuga lasts 432,000 years. In Kali Yuga, vice increases to such a point that at the termination of the Yuga, the Supreme Lord himself appears as the Kali avatar, vanquishes the demons, saves his devotees, and commences another Sata Yuga. Then the process is set rolling again. These 4 yugas, so that's a couple million years there, rotating 1,000 times. So that process going on 1,000 times compromises one day of Brahma. And the same number comprise one night. So that amount of time twice is one day and one night. Brahma lives 100 of such years. 100 of such years. These 100 years, by Earth calculations, total to 311 trillion and 40 billion Earth years. By these calculations, the life of Brahma seems fantastic and interminable. But from the viewpoint of eternity, it is as brief as a lightning flash. In the causal ocean, there are innumerable Brahmas rising and disappearing like bubbles in the Atlantic. Brahma and his creation are all part of the material universe, and therefore they're in constant flux, meaning they change. So basically he's saying that just massive amounts of time on these massive scales of time. And this whole entire creation of this universe, 411 trillion years, they say, is really nothing compared to eternity. You know, like the blink of an eye. Like he said, so many bubbles in the Atlantic is how many Brahmas creating and destroying universes there are. So I just wanted to read that to give you the background. But what we're going to talk about here is the Kali Yuga. And the reason we're going to talk about the Kali Yuga is because that's the one that we're in right now. And you might say, what is the, what's the purpose of talking about it, or what does Kali Yuga mean? And the reason it's important is to give you a perspective on the state of affairs in the world and where we're at. So Kali Yuga is the last of the four, where there's only about 25% goodness and 3/4, sin, irreligion, disenchantment. The greatest part of illusion, where people are the most caught in ego, is basically what it is. So the Kali Yuga is the lowest of all yugas. It's 430,000 years. We've only been in it for 5,000 years, since about 3000 BC, when it was ushered in through the battle at Kurukshetra with Krishna when he spoke the Bhagavad Gita. That was the end of the prior yuga. So the reason it gives a good perspective is because we wonder why we struggle so much with our minds, why there's so much starvation and greed, protesting, war, government and political corruption everywhere, people suffering, disease, famine. And you got to remember too, disease and famine and all that is manifested at a certain level by the collective consciousness of the universe. So in a more pure yuga, there's actually going to be less famine, less disease, more rain falling, all things like that. That's all still a manifestation of the yuga. So you have to remember this when you're looking compassionately to yourself and to others. What do you expect? Because we are living in Kali Yuga. So there's going to be continued strife. And it doesn't mean that you don't help trying to serve people and you don't help try to relieve suffering, because you do, and you try to make it a better world. But you're not attached to it being perfect, because it's never going to be in this yuga. It's actually quite, in fact, the opposite. It's going to continue to decay. And that's not a bad thing in the eternal perspective, like we were just speaking about here. It's just another part of the game, and it's another part of the cycle. We just happen to be in it right here. Excuse me. And since most people have such a strong attachment to our own life and our own melodrama, where we're at right now, it seems extremely important. We got to save the world. This is going to be the end. We could lose everything. Humanity's going to be destroyed. But, the Hindus would tell you, no, this is just another cycle. There's infinite amounts of them. They happen all the time. It's really not that big of a deal. So it's interesting to look at it from that perspective. And that means when you're doing work on yourself, your own spiritual work, your own whatever, meditation practices, trying to be a good person, live a good life, you got to have some compassion for yourself, because you have to remember what yuga you're in. In this yuga, it's extremely difficult. Like it says, vice and irreligion are predominant. It's extremely difficult to lead a pure life. Doesn't mean there's not goodness, because there most certainly is, but it's going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging here. Your mind's going to be, difficult to curb and maintain. That's why in the Kali Yuga, chanting and devotion to God, love, is recommended above meditative practices, because people aren't able to sit still in this yuga. Very few beings are able to calm their mind and meditate for substantial lengths of time. So practices of love and devotion, or karma yoga, the yoga of action, are more predominant, or chanting, in the Kali Yuga. So this Yuga is going, we're right in the beginning of it, so it's going to be going on for extremely long amount of time. And of course that, it depends on what your perspective is about the truth or untruth of this. But if you can understand this knowledge, it just gives you a little bit of a different way to look at things, where you won't be so attached to trying to save the entire world. Like I said, you still do good and you still do service, but you understand what Yuga we're in, that strife is going to be there, and it's part of how it is. So it just gives you a little bit different way of looking at things.